Mental Health, the Up&Up. We're trying to make mental health care clear, helpful, and maybe even fun. We're chatting with licensed therapists, but this is not therapy. These are simply thoughts and ideas for you to discuss with your own therapist and to help you on your journey of complete wellness. Right? Yeah. No, it's that one. I 100% agree, but I also am aware enough that I had to teach myself to look at someone's physical appearance as a part of their value, if that makes sense. I grew up taking art classes, so I pay attention to how people look. And it's like, oh, that's aesthetically pleasing. Oh, that's not. But their value of whether I'm attracted to them has nothing to do with how they look. 100%.
Yeah. I can look at the qualities, and I think there are qualities. There's actually that, what's it called? Whoops. The triangle, not the triangle, it's a pentagram, like of the Leonardo da Vinci. I'm trying to hook this on something. The figure of the, you've seen the thing of like the man going like this, and then there's like a...
The Vitruvian Man?
Yes.
Yeah.
And those, apparently those ratios are very tied into what people say is attractive. It's super interesting. I'm going to send you something.
Okay.
So you know who John Cleese is?
Yeah.
Okay. So they made this piece of paper, this clear cellulose piece of paper, whatever. This is bugging the hell out of me. I'll try
It
that.
keeps tugging on your headset.
Yeah. And usually I have something like down here, and this is just too high. So they made this cellophane piece of paper, whatever, where they just put triangles of those ratios.
Okay.
And then they put it over Tom Cruise's face.
Okay.
And like it lined up, like people's like eyebrows and eye lines and this part of their nose and this part of their mouth. It's different, but the ratios are the same. Or the ratios fit those ratios, like from here to here, from here to here. And like you put it over Tom Cruise's faces and it's perfect. You put it over like Grace Kelly's face, it's perfect. Then they put it over John Cleese's face, and it's just like way off. And the documentary or whatever it was, I think it's technically a documentary, is narrated by John Cleese.
Okay.
So he's there like, let's try it on my face, and then they show it, and he just looks up like,
That is funny.
Anyway.
It's funny how my conversations with you end up cycling similarly to what I talk about with my mom.
Oh.
One of the podcasts we did for hers, and I'll extrapolate here since we have viewers. My mom is a tailor, and so we talk about clothing and alterations and custom work and blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about the ratios of the human body, and in this case, it was men's clothes versus women's clothes.
Oh, interesting.
And part of the struggle of women's clothes is they try to make them the same way they make men's, and it doesn't work, and that's why they always fit just a little wrong.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things they know. They know that if you take this measurement and this measurement of a guy and you subtract the one from the other, you'll get his inseam. And it's always, or you subtract 10 inches, you'll always get his inseam. That is just a statement of fact across the board, with very few exceptions. But that doesn't line up for women. You can't just subtract 10 inches because the ratio of how much body is where on a woman is totally different. And so anyway, it's funny that there are certain, even though there's such a variety of humanity and we all look so different, there are certain things you can count on to be the same within a ratio.
Yeah.
Across the board.
They also do this thing where they put like lights on people's joints, like elbow, wrist, shoulder, and then everything else is completely black and all you can see are their lights, and people can tell whether it's a man or a woman.
That is super interesting. Which again means that it has to be ratio shoulder to hip and to knee to. I'm trying to think of the major joints and to elbows. That is so interesting.
And there are some exceptions.
For
Like
sure.
actually, I know, I can't remember honestly if it's a man or a woman, but whose body proportions, like if you did that, I think it's a man. I think I know who it is. But if you did that, he looks like a woman, like his
Ah,
ratios.
that's
Yeah,
super
he has a
fascinating.
really wide hips, which is unusual, and a very, let's see, is it short or long? Something with his torso that is just,
Atypical.
yeah.
The other
Anyway,
thing, the other thing that I don't think they study enough is whether those ratios hold out across all the demographics. Because for example, Pacific Islanders are built very different than in what is typical. Asian mainlanders are built different than what Europeans are. So, do the ratios hold up across all, or is it specific to people group?
I'd be curious about that too. And again, I think there's enough. I mean, it's kind of like skin tone,
Yeah.
Yes, people born in Africa have darker skin tone, but someone born in Italy might have skin tone darker than someone in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
kind of uh, that's really interesting because yeah, I'm just going all sorts of directions on that. But I would think that the main proportions would be the same.
Mm-hmm.
But like even like when you think of I can't remember what the name of the eyes uh, in Asia,
I don't know, but
not
yeah,
round eyes,
yeah.
and then the width of nose
Mm-hmm.
in like African. But so that's definitely different. But is the proportion like between here and here
Right.
still like here and here is twice as much as here and here, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
that is very interesting.
Yeah.
So I did have a topic I wanted to throw at you just because I've been watching Bones recently. Have you
Okay.
watched Bones?
I have.
And because I know your high horse about TV therapists, what were
Yeah.
your thoughts on Stephen Fry as their therapist in Bones?
Oh, you totally would have to remind me.
Okay.
I remember that, but not enough to pass judgment.
So it starts. I just watched the first episodes with him last night. So it starts how they first meet him is Booth, the FBI agent, goes through a ordeal where he's not sure whether he intentionally or unintentionally killed someone.
Uh-huh.
And he's struggling with that internally and it's affecting other things. And he lashes out by shooting at the clown speaker on top of an ice cream truck.
Uh-huh.
And so he gets his gun taken away and has to go to therapy. Go figure.
Uh-huh.
And Stephen Fry is his therapist.
Uh-huh.
So he comes over and he doesn't want to deal with it. He's not the kind to go to therapy. He's,
Right.
that. And he just wants Stephen Fry to just sign his paper and send him on his way so he can go back to doing his job because that's more important than all of this.
Than doing it in a healthy manner.
So Stephen Fry's like, "Oh yeah, sure. I mean, so you discharged your firearm? Yeah, yeah. It was I shot at a car. Oh, was it full of like terrorists or something? Well, it was an ice cream truck." And he pauses and he looks at him and he says, "Really? Yeah, it was the speaker on top." And I see. And he folds up the paper instead of signing it. And it's really fun because it's mandatory. It's for his job. And Stephen Fry's way of dealing with him, even when he gets aggressive, is highly entertaining.
Yeah.
And it just as characters, it's very fascinating. But Stephen Fry plays it as a highly intellectual because it's Stephen Fry.
Right. I can't imagine him even pretending to not.
Right.
As an aside,
Yeah.
Actually I was listening to or looking at a interview from Hugh Laurie,
Yeah.
right? Who is Stephen Fry's, they've been friends forever.
Yeah.
And about how he had Stephen Fry over for dinner or something. And they were playing Scrabble. And like Stephen Fry was there like, if you don't know the exact meaning of that word, you may not use it. And it's like, and just went off on, you cannot use a word you don't know, which is, anyway, very Stephen Fry-ish.
Very. I could absolutely see him pulling that. That's great. But no, it's really fun, and as you get to know him as a character, and as he develops and becomes more integrated, and he starts to see both Booth and Bones at the same time. I think for work partner counseling, and then later for marriage counseling or something like that. Spoilers for people who haven't watched. And he's a very interesting character. In this case, it's a very healthy option for them, because he can meet Bones on the intellectual level, because the whole premise of the story is that she's very unemotional, to the point where people think she's robotic, and it's not that, it's that she's repressed so much because she's been through so much, and she ends up coming off more Asperger's autistic, because she doesn't get social references at all. She doesn't understand social cues or emotional cues until she really stops and looks at them. And for her, this was an intentional choice she made to deal with her trauma. So Stephen Fry is able to meet her on that level, but he is also able to meet Booth, who's very emotional, very instinctive, very, and not in a bad way. Just in he's very religious. He's very tied to certain ideologies that fuel why he does things. And he kind of bridges that gap and makes them both interact with each other better. And it's really cool. So in that way, it's a very healthy view of therapy. Yeah.
So I'll tell a couple of things. As if it had really stood out to me as horrible, I probably would have remembered it better.
That's true.
And it kind of goes to a couple of things. Like, in therapy, there's some kind of underlying things that are just important regardless of style. And one of those is rapport. Like, do you get along with the person? Can you do that? Like you're describing, he was able to develop rapport with Bones and with Booth. In a different way. So that's very important. The other part is to at least have some curiosity. Whereas if a client says, I'm okay, unless you would hire them to be a therapist to do assessments, why would you believe them? You know? So to be a little curious about that. So tell me how okay is, or tell me about this shooting, and that's really curious.
And that was played very well, because Stephen Fry, again, he starts off thinking this is just a run-of-the-mill, an FBI agent discharged their firearm in the line of duty, and then he's like, okay, wait, this obviously isn't what happened, and so he digs deeper. And turns out it had nothing to do with the ice cream truck, go figure. And he approaches everything with that sense of curiosity, so that absolutely was present.
And I would say with that is the concept of when someone does something that seemingly doesn't make sense, that's kind of when therapy comes in, and it's kind of like, okay, I get you shooting at a bus full of terrorists. I mean,
right.
Don't quote me on that or whatever. Or I get you shooting at a lion running towards you, growling with their claws out. Shooting at a loudspeaker clown on an ice cream truck? There's something else going on there. And again, to have curiosity, and then to open that door for the client to say what's going on, instead of saying, oh, that obviously means that, whatever. And
that was another thing that impressed me with how they put that forward, because he opens the floor for Booth to talk about it, and Booth's like, I'm not going to talk. There's nothing. This is nothing. It was just, okay, it annoyed me. It was just a thing. So you discharged your firearm in a group of civilians and endangered them? I didn't endanger them. I always hit what I shoot at. And he's like, oh, okay, so you're a hyper-controlling person. You try to control your environment. And you feel confident in your skills and able to do that. So something pushed you over the edge there. So, and again, he just kind of, he pokes at it all around until he finally gets to it.
And I've described it too as like a physical doctor. You come in, you say, I'm not feeling well. And I use my example of I had gallbladder issues and doctors poking at my stomach. Does this feel
Mm-hmm.
okay? Does this feel okay? And then before he could even say, does this, I was there like, yo! And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's your gallbladder.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, people like sometimes, I don't know, either get frustrated or think there's not a uh, pattern to it when counselors like talk around things.
Yeah.
Um, and there's somewhat of a pattern, but some of it is poking until someone says yow,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I've described it to clients like a detective. Actually, I do say this out loud, so it's just one of my weirdnesses. If someone were murdered in this room,
Mm-hmm.
and a detective came in, the detective couldn't say, well, I'm only going to look at spots that actually have clues,
Yeah.
right? You can't. You just got to look around going in some sort of order. But then
Mm-hmm.
also if you find something, you go like, oh, I'm going to look a little harder
Yeah.
here, So
Another pop culture reference. We've been watching Columbo, and it's the epitome of your example of that because he walks
yes.
in and everyone's like, "Oh, Sergeant, the body's over here." He says, "Okay," and then he walks off this way, and they're like, "Where is he going?" And he
Yeah.
always finds something that's out of place.
Yeah. And he's also a good example of that open-ended questioning, that kind of like, huh,
Yeah.
so you, you hated your husband and you
Mm-hmm.
owned a gun, huh?
Yeah.
And you were in the same place on Thursday night, the time of the murder. You
Yeah.
know,
He
uh,
sometimes does it in a backhanded way, but something I really respect about the character in Columbo is that he is always a man of compassion.
uh,
There have only been two murderers where he absolutely lost his temper with them, and
uh,
one was someone who was callously cruel to a woman who was just a total doll. Like you could tell this was just a sweetheart, and this person treated her with disdain and then tried to frame her for murder. And
uh.
that hit one of his buttons. And the other one was actually Leonard Nimoy, who played a sociopathic, hyper intelligent doctor, and it was one of the only times that Peter Falk raises his voice in interacting with the murderer, and absolutely takes him to task because
Yeah, I can see that because there's not that there should be a difference in like how wrong it is, but
yeah,
to me, there's a difference in not only like saying I'm smart enough to manipulate this person or murder this person, but the picking on they're the most vulnerable person in the
precisely,
room.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh, and yeah, to me, that's a kind of a pick on someone your own size.
mm-hmm,
Like if Leonard Nimoy, if you think you're that smart, you know,
yeah,
try murdering Stephen Fry and see how it goes.
right, exactly,
Yeah. Uh, Before I forget, the other thing that's important to me when you were talking about Stephen Fry as a counselor is
yes,
their being authentic is also important.
mm-hmm,
So if I can see Stephen Fry doing that, I can't see like Robin Williams in oh, it's famous. You know what movie I'm
Patch
talking about?
Adams.
No, 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 no. In the Matt Damon,
Oh,
the math one. We'll both remember in a minute.
oh, um, mm,
Good Will Hunting.
that's thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robin Williams has a completely different persona,
Mm-hmm.
which is congruent to him. And
Mm-hmm.
I just recommended a movie to a client that I thought the counselor was brilliant and right on task, but was different than either one of those two other counselors. And the movie is Antoine, and then it's his last name. So Antwone is the first name. I can't remember the last name, but that's what the movie's called. And
Okay.
it again is one of those people who's they're like, nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
And the therapist again, he's in the military. It's kind of the military orders him to 5 sessions.
And
the therapist kind of goes like, well, I get paid no matter what, and
Mm-hmm.
picks up a book and starts reading,
Yeah.
And Antoine is there like, well, first he kind of sits there for what, maybe even a whole session, but then later they're like, hey, hold on, why aren't you asking me this, and why aren't you asking me this, and
Mm-hmm.
it works, it's kind of like removing that pressure,
Yeah.
you know uh, and I always talk too about my style is very laid back. I definitely use humor. I use a lot of analogies. And then I have a good friend who sits behind a desk and is more clinical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that one way is better than the other. It's that if I tried to act like her or she tried to act like me, that lack of congruence, that
Absolutely.
inconsistency would come through, and you can't develop rapport if you're not who you are.
There's
So,
I have so many. I have like 2 more movies, but did you have anything you wanted to talk about? Because I'm monopolizing the topics here.
no, I love the movie thing. Keep
Okay.
going.
So, first one that came to mind, my husband made me watch this movie that made me so mad and cry. And I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. It had Martin Sheen and his son, not Michael, the other one.
Emilio Estevez?
That guy,
Yeah.
yes. And Kathy Bates and Kimberly Williams Paisley. And it takes place in the 70s after Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
And Emilio plays a. What? It was called The War at Home. He's here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, baby. So it's called The War at Home, and it's Emilio Estevez is somebody who got drafted and had to go to Vietnam and came back, and he's obviously really, really, really struggling to reintegrate in society and to deal through his trauma. Ooh, this cues in another thing. And the movie is heartbreaking because you have this family who's a very, very structured family, and this is what we do because this is what we do. What do you mean you're not going to do it the way we do it?
Mm-hmm.
You're just being disrespectful. And they're one of those kind of families. And
Yeah.
he's come back from living in life or death situations, living in situations where he had to make hard choices he's still not okay with. And all of the stupid little petty things that people focus on mean nothing to him. So what do you mean you're not going to dress up for Thanksgiving dinner? We always dress up for Thanksgiving dinner. I'm wearing this. Why can't I just wear what I'm wearing?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care. He has no space in his brain and his heart anywhere in him to really just deal with the petty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Kimberly Williams plays his kid sister, and she's going to school for psychology, and she's better than some at acknowledging that he has a problem that needs addressed.
Mm-hmm.
But she still behaves in the social family norms that are causing him distress and making it worse for him.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best scenes is he's sitting outside because he really struggles with being indoors. He always goes and sits in the backyard where it's quiet and he can be alone in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes out and she sits next to him and says, "I'm going to sit with you." And at first he's like, "Okay." And like he's really enjoying just her sitting with him. But then she tries to force conversation.
Yeah.
She's like, "So what should we talk about?" And he's like, I can't do that. Can't do what? I can't do fake conversation. I'm not doing that. And instead of saying, "Okay," and just being quiet and being okay with the quiet, she says, "Well, then what do you want to talk about?" Which then just pushes him and it becomes an argument. And we're watching this movie and everybody in the family, and it ends up that the thing that he's struggling with most is a family.
I can see your emotion in your face. This movie looks like it really affected
you. It was
you.
so sad. We had to go watch something dorky and happy afterward because it was one of those. But his actual issue had to do with his dad more than the war, but it all goes together. But everybody in the family tries to connect with him and tries to bring him out of his shell, and they start off good, but then the minute they get a little bit of progress with him, instead of just settling in it, leaving it at that, they push and push and push and push until he screams at them. And
Mm-hmm.
then they just don't know what his problem is.
Right. I was trying to help. Yeah.
We're just trying to
Or,
love you. Why won't you
yeah.
let us? And then every time he does blow up at them or step away, they come at him and tell him all. Instead of saying, "I understand you're going through a difficult time," they say, "Well, you don't understand how difficult this is for us."
Yeah.
And so nobody acknowledges his pain. Nobody acknowledges that something happened that he can't cope with.
Yeah. You touched on like 7 of my pet peeves.
Okay.
The one being, and I mention this a lot, there's a Mr. Rogers quote, and I never quote quotes exactly right, which somehow makes it not a quote. I don't know.
I know this quote. Go ahead.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So something like, people have said stop crying forever. And what they really mean is, I'm uncomfortable when you cry.
Yeah.
So please stop making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas the difference of, if you're crying, I'll sit with you as you cry,
Yeah.
whether I'm uncomfortable or not. The fact that you have something to cry about is the priority here.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other one is about that pushing, and there's a there's it just works better to kind of open the door and be curious,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of be there. Like, even the therapist I just mentioned, who read a book,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think that was very kind of purposeful. Like, I'm not going to push you,
Yeah.
and the thing is most of the time when you push people, they dig in their heels and get more resistant.
Absolutely.
So given a gentle nudge, or like, that's interesting
Yeah.
that you shot a clown, is
Yeah.
very different than, we need to talk about this. Which I'll bring up my third pet peeve, which
Yes.
is might be the biggest pet peeve. But a lot of times in therapy, clients, and unfortunately also a lot of therapists,
Mm-hmm.
think that in order to get better, however you want to say that, we need to pull out all this trauma. We need to
Mm-hmm.
get it into the light, talk about it, expose it, resolve it. And
Yeah.
I think some of that is true. Even a lot of that is true. I think there are some things that we don't need to pull out everything if we
Mm-hmm.
pull out some themes. But the other part of it is, um, there are 2 parts to that. I ask the question, and I'll ask you, and I might have asked you before,
Mm-hmm.
would you rather drive a car with no gas or no brakes?
No gas.
Why?
Um, because the idea of not being able to stop myself is scary than
Terrifying?
more terrifying than slowly running out of steam.
Yeah. Um, exactly my point. If you're in therapy and all you have is gas, and
Mm-hmm.
like that sister is just there, like, come on, come on, come on, move, move, move.
Mm-hmm.
And Emilio Estevez has no way of putting on the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
So when I talk to clients, especially about deep trauma, I make sure their brakes are working first before
Yeah.
we even start to move. And then as we start to move, or if we're moving, and I see something or they say something that says, that kind of indicates to me, okay, it's time to put the brakes on,
Mm-hmm.
then we put on the brakes. And even if not, I can at least say, hey,
Yeah.
do you need to test your brakes? And I always think of me riding my bike down the hill in the neighborhood, that at first I was terrified, as I would go down here. You can't see my hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until I got comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that, knowing that those brakes were there if I needed them, was what allowed me to get down that hill.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and again, a lot of time therapists do that thing that sister was doing. We need to get this out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not in a way that feels unsafe or is unsafe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those
I
brakes are
know
important.
I know for me, even just as a friend trying to be there for people in the past, I have been very, very bad about pushing and pushing and pushing too much.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten much more milder in my older age. And it's just an acknowledgement of, because I do believe that there are some times when, in order to make progress or to get someone past a block, you have to shove them out the door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not over the edge. We're not trying to shove them off a cliff, but you need to
Right.
push them through a door or do something to kind of make them stop and go like this, you
Yeah.
know? But it also can be very harmful if it's done at the wrong time
Yeah.
or for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been, I've definitely done that badly for people that I care about. And it's something that I think about a lot.
Yeah. And again, it's not from lack of caring or lack of love
No,
or lack of wanting someone to heal.
right.
It's like if somebody had, removed my brakes going down that hill, I might have made it without falling,
Yeah.
but I would have been scared to go down the next hill or
And you would have never
hated that
trusted that person
person.
ever again. Yes.
Yeah.
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 And you saw that in that movie too, in The War at Home, is you could tell everybody cared about him.
Yeah.
But the way they were trying to care for him was too much. Or not too much, that's a bad way to say it. It was too desperate.
Yeah.
They
And
were
it
desperate
didn't
for life to
change.
go back to normal, and he couldn't be
Yeah.
there yet.
Yeah. And also maybe not um, individual. Like I think a lot of times people think, well, this is what would work for me, or even I know this is the end game, so let's just jump there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that tends to
Oops.
not work. So yeah, besides like therapists having their own personalities, clients do too, and their own
Yeah.
path and their own pace. And so to honor that, the sister was honoring her pace, not
Mm-hmm.
his pace.
Well, and she was all excited about all the new things she was learning at college about psychology.
Yes, which is
And she
also a
wanted
thing.
to apply it to the people she cared most about. And it's like, okay.
Definitely a thing. Yeah, yeah. I also think, like I've had clients who, we talk for 30 minutes and then we play cards for 20 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
just so they learn to trust that they can slow that down, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also think I'm a little exaggerating on this, but I do think one of the reasons that counseling works, even if nothing else about counseling works, is that the person knows they can come in,
Yeah.
drag their shit out, and
Mm-hmm.
then in 50 minutes, they're done,
You can put
you
it back
know?
in the box and go
Yeah.
on with the rest of your week.
And it is that balance of putting on the gas, but then testing the brakes, or
Yeah.
even using the brakes, just not just to test them, but to
My
slow it
cousin and
down.
I just yesterday were talking about that as far as antidepressants, because a
Uh-huh.
lot of people are very leery of using antidepressants because there has been a history of them being used wrongly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we were talking about
And
how
current, that hasn't totally ended.
it hasn't, sadly, but no, we were talking about how the appropriate use of them is really to take the edge off enough that you can breathe while you're working through the problem,
It could
whatever
be
your
great.
problem
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's your example that you usually do is feeling like you're drowning or you're underwater, and
Yeah.
the
And
the
to
medicine
just
is supposed to get it to where you can tread water.
just to where it's manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, so that you can deal with whatever actual issues. If it's a situation,
Yeah.
you can deal with the situations that are making you struggle.
There's I just love hearing random facts and then applying them to
Mm-hmm.
psychology. So there's a truth, I don't know. They know this is true, that when the weather gets really hot and people are in danger of sunstroke,
Mm-hmm.
if they lower the temperature 2 degrees or 5 degrees or whatever, that
Yeah.
doesn't um, that's not as effective as having the high heat and then for an hour dropping it to a tolerable amount and then going back up and then dropping it to a tolerable amount. So that kind of long range always being here is harder than the, oh, I'm here and then whew, I just get it. Okay, I'm here again.
Yeah.
That works a lot better. Yeah.
That kind of makes sense why in the hotter climates they have siesta time in the peak of the day.
Yeah.
Because then you can get out of the heat or at
Yeah.
least lay down and have less stress on your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why it is. And just so I also get up on a high horse about medications. And I usually talk to people, like I'm not a prescriber, but I know some about medications. But when I talk to parents whose kids, people are suggesting their kid gets put on an ADHD medication. Okay,
which has also been overused.
Totally. And for misdiagnosis, which is, again, horrible. If the issue is somewhere else and you treat this, then you stop looking over here.
Yeah.
But what I say to parents, and what I guess I'd say the same thing to an adult, is if taking that medication makes you say, oh my goodness, my child is back, you know, then pursue that. And if taking that medication makes you go like, where my child's well behaved, but where's my kid?
Yeah.
You know, so if an antidepressant calms you down, but you're there like, I'm fuzzy, I'm not here.
I feel like I'm interacting with the world through a pane of glass.
Phase, yeah. You know, no, but if taking an antidepressant says, oh, here I am again.
Yeah.
You know, that distraction has been lifted so I can actually be me again, the healthy me, you know, then, you know, again, to me, that's something to pursue. But
absolutely,
no medication should make you feel like you've disappeared, except like maybe anesthesia.
Then you don't want to be there, I promise.
You don't want to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Mental health medications. No. So yeah, I kind of recapping some of the things we talked about is the style of therapy is different than, there's not one way to be effective.
Yeah.
And I guess I would describe it like maybe paintings or art is there's not one style of art that makes it beautiful. You know, there's different styles and they're all art.
Yeah.
There are definitely some underlying, like, no matter what your style is, you gotta
that's about principle, not style.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
And even in art, there are things that you have to put forward in order for it to be art, and that's an expression of a thought, a feeling, a moment, whatever it is. And there are different ways to do that, and that's style.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of going back to a different car analogy, like a car needs to get you from point A to point B. Whether it's a Ferrari or a VW or whatever is just, I don't know, a different way to do that, or a different trappings of how to do that. But if you don't get from point A to point B, it doesn't matter what your car looks like.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, there's, I think a very interesting podcast topic would be like maybe dredging up different therapists in, like, that are in like popular enough movies that people would go like, oh yeah, there's a therapist. I love, for a lot of different reasons, I personally love the TV show Lucifer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of, actually, I think it's underneath all its like, let's get people to watch glitter. You know, there's some really serious and hopeful messages there, and one of them is like your hell is repeating that thing that you did wrong, and the way out of hell is to say, oh shit, I did that wrong, I want to do it a different way. You know, so you have that opportunity and most people don't take it. But anyway, that's beside the point. There's a therapist on there, and they're like, oh my God, please no. It's delightful in the show.
Yeah.
Please, if anybody watches Lucifer and your therapist does anything even close to that therapist, I love the actress. I love the point plot or but
Yeah.
as a therapist,
I just watched First Wives Club a little while ago, and that's one where the therapist runs off with the lady's husband.
Yeah.
And while encouraging the lady to be stronger and more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a hot mess. It's like, okay, everybody should know that this is bad.
Yeah. There's a very, gosh, I can't remember what this one is too, but about 3 siblings who were molested, and the therapist she gets, I don't know if it's she or he, but they get them to a good place, but by totally breaking confidentiality and totally going outside. And it's like, oh, I like the message of the show. The therapist
was terrible.
Please no. Yeah. And there's actually it's an old show, and I loved it. And I don't know that this therapist was great, but wasn't as bad as it could have been. And it was a cartoon, Dr. Katz, Katz, and he was a therapist, and they brought on comedians.
Okay. Yeah.
And you could tell who they were. It was cartoon, but it was their voices, and it was a little bit their shtick, and so they would do their like comedy shtick, and he would say things like, "Huh, so you shot a clown," It was just funny.
That's up there. That's up there with the meme of, "Oh no, I told my therapist about my D&D character, and she diagnosed all of my problem issues." Based off of who my character was.
Right, yeah. Yeah. There's a song, I can't remember if it's I'm in love with your avatar, or are you in love with my avatar? It's like, it's not me. You're in love with my presentation, which is also can be very deep and Freudian.
Yeah.
But no, the Dr. Katz, he's not a bad therapist.
Mm-hmm.
The show is totally meant to be just a comedy show, and that's the way they set it up.
Yeah.
And he also is like, they can be mid-sentence, and he's like, ding, time's up, goodbye, which is definitely not a good.
Right.
But I also really like one of the quotes from that show is, I use it all the time. It's like if you and I are arguing, I would say to you, Anna, you hear just what you want, a swimming pool. And it's like, and it's just that weird circular. I actually heard swimming pool, didn't I? And yeah, these two, I think it's him and his son.
That's funny.
And he's like, no, I actually heard you say swimming pool. But
I think I've had those conversations.
Yep. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of movies now that we're talking about it that actually do have therapists, and TV shows. Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Reasonable therapist who, again, adjusted to her client.
Even though it was outside her comfort zone.
Yeah.
I was actually really impressed with how they displayed that, because he had hang-ups about therapy partly from his own upbringing, but also from his own personal experience. Mm-hmm. And she's the same. She approached therapy from a specific viewpoint because of her upbringing and her own personal experience, and wanting to make sure she kept that line clear.
Yeah.
And they found a way to respect that while still giving him what he needs, and I thought that was beautiful.
It was very well done. And again, I'd have to go back and look. I don't want to endorse any TV therapists without really analyzing it deeper.
Right.
But I like the ones that at least don't show blatant sexuality,
Did you ever watch Shrinking? It was also on Apple TV. And it has Harrison Ford and some guy that I know his face, but I don't remember his name. And basically the guy who I know his face but not his name kind of goes off the deep end. He's a therapist, but he's kind of been stuck in a rut with his grief for a long time, and he finally gets his head above water to realize, oh wait, I have to interact with life again. Mm-hmm. But he does that by basically telling off all his clients for the places where they're stuck. It's like, oh no, it's really, it was a very bad choice, and he kind
Right.
of has to deal with it. And then it'll probably drive you nuts because he breaks certain boundaries and barriers. Like he has the one person move into his pool house. That's
Oh,
his
wow.
client, and
That's a
he's
little,
yeah.
yeah.
And Harrison Ford is his mentor slash boss at the clinic they work at. And Harrison Ford's like, "You don't do that. Why
Yeah.
are you doing?" And he
Yeah.
plays the grumpy old man, and it's delightful.
Yeah. I was recently talking to another therapist about like rules, like why do I do this? When do I do this? And
Yeah,
I compared it to there's no, there are guidelines.
yeah,
Some of the rules, like in Ted Lasso, you think about and bend a little bit depending on your client and the situation.
mm-hmm,
And she was there like, but when? And I said, it's kind of like learning how to ride a motorcycle.
mm-hmm,
You need to know the basics, but riding a motorcycle over pavement is different than over gravel. It's different if you're trying to get somewhere versus having a nice Saturday afternoon
cruise.
drive.
Yeah,
It's different, if there's other cars around, if you're by yourself, there's so many differences, and you absolutely have to understand the mechanics and how it works. But
mm-hmm,
sometimes you do things that are a little different because you're on gravel,
yeah,
or um, and I love this example. So it's not real specific, but your therapists aren't supposed to accept gifts from their clients.
yeah,
And that's because of that relationship. The person should come in. One of the reasons therapy works is that the client doesn't have to think about the therapist,
yeah,
about whether the therapist is having a good day, or is this going to hurt their feelings, or is this, are they going to judge me, or are they going to think I'm wrong, or whatever.
right,
They shouldn't have to worry about that. So that's why you don't accept gifts. You kind of, it should be kind of more a one-way relationship.
mm-hmm,
But I saw like a little 11-year-old girl who every time in therapy, her mom would stop and they would get a 7-Eleven slushie and she would bring me one. But I graciously accepted it and actually took a couple of sips
yeah,
because that was important to her,
yeah,
and she was just so pleased. Like, I think some of it was like, this is my therapy, not my mom's.
mm-hmm.
I get to give you this. We are developing a relationship,
Oh,
you
that
know.
makes it interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And the other time I actually had a client who I actually had to talk to a couple other therapists to question this, but gave me a blanket for my office,
Mm-hmm.
so other clients could curl up, have something soft to curl up with,
Yeah,
and ended up, I did accept that gift. I did go online and see how much it cost, to make sure it wasn't like a $300,
yeah,
but it was like a, Costco soft plushie, you
yeah,
know. And the idea is to not let those things interfere with therapy, but and also if they support therapy,
yeah,
like the slushy, you know,
right.
you kind of break those rules because that was really important to her. It actually
It
helped
helped.
her feel like she was, yeah,
It helped give her agency.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
good.
Even though I still think I just never want to drink a slushy again. I hope that little girl who's a grown up now is not watching or remembers. She probably doesn't even remember.
You
But
still appreciated the slushy.
I did, yeah. And the thought, oh, yes. And the reminder that I don't want to drink those again, that was important too.
Um, so we've been chatting for a while, but I had another topic that could keep us going for even longer. Should we save it for another day?
No, let's keep going, and then maybe
I
you can
can cut
split
it.
it
And,
up, or we
yeah.
can do this as a super long, listen to us chat for as long as you want.
So I have been getting called out slightly by
Uh-huh.
my nearest and dearest for overdiagnosing, layman diagnosing.
Yeah,
I am not a therapist. I am not, but watching movies, looking at people saying, "Oh, that that thing right there sounds like this, and this sounds
yeah,
like this,"
yeah,
which I think is a natural curve of education.
yeah,
You get excited. It's like the girl in the movie. You get excited
Yeah.
about the new information you have, and so you start looking for where to apply it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so Stephen and my mom have both been kind of saying, okay, just because it kind of sounds like that doesn't mean that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, but it could be.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. When you learn anything, you're there like, oh, that looks like good art, or oh,
Mm-hmm.
that looks like. I actually am taking this class I've talked to you about
Yeah.
developing e-learning
Mm-hmm.
uh, classes, courses, and they asked your goal at the very beginning, and I said, my goal is to want to know why I hate some e-learning things and why I love others, you know? I
Yeah.
get that, but to be able to pinpoint exactly why.
Right.
Now, if I, for the rest of my life, I go around saying like, that's not, I can't think of any term right now that, you know, that doesn't create motivation and that's not meaningful dialogue or whatever, it's not helpful. But as I'm learning it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hyper aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is that kind of labeling can definitely be detrimental if it's with judgment or um, what I was taught, and I don't think every therapist is taught this, um, but in diagnosing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, most people say, why do you diagnose? And the answer for a lot of people is, well, you know, to know what the problem is. It's like, yeah, but why do we need that label?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great teacher, I wish I could remember her name. Um, so therapists either say that or they say, well, because the insurance company needs it. You know, it's like, that should not be why you diagnose.
No.
And she said there's two reasons to diagnose, and one is simply shorthand. You know,
Yeah.
like if I say, oh, that's major depression, or oh, that's gaslighting, then the other person doesn't have to think super hard and just goes
And
like,
try to
oh, okay, I
describe it.
got what you're talking about. And the other reason is to guide treatment. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
say not in counseling, then to guide response. Like if someone says to me, whatever, you're ugly, and I say, well, that's rude or that's mean,
Yeah.
then that helps me guide my response. Instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying, oh, I am, you know, I say, I don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
So,
That
yeah.
and on the other side of the desk,
Uh-huh.
um, it also is helpful sometimes from several people I've talked to. It's helpful sometimes to get a diagnosis if it helps make you feel less crazy.
I forgot about that one. Yes, you're 100% right.
I
Yeah,
have
it's like,
someone
oh, this is a thing.
I have someone who said, yeah, like I've gone to therapy before, and they've always talked about my PTSD, and they've always talked about anxiety disorder, and finally this person said, "Oh, maybe it's this. Let's look into that." And so
Hmm.
I started looking into it, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yes! Now I know why." Because I think the word she used was, I always felt like there was more going on in my brain than what people were understanding. There was
Yeah.
something else happening that they weren't quite getting.
Yeah.
And so,
There's very few times like I pull out the DSM, the official diagnosis book.
mhm,
Um, and I feel like I know those things pretty well. I know what questions to ask to kind of sort that out. I always keep it provisional because I never know everything and it
mhm,
can change. I had a client who I started seeing for anxiety. Once the anxiety cleared up, we were both there like, huh, I think you're on the spectrum. And it's like, huh, yeah, that fits, but it
yeah.
was covered up. But anyway, the one time I literally pull out the book and sit it on my lap and read through it is with panic attacks.
Mhm.
Because one of the symptoms of panic attacks is feeling crazy. You know,
Yeah.
so I say, hey, here's the 9 things. I can't remember exactly how many they are. Is this something that happens? And they're like, oh, yes. Is
Yeah.
this something that happened? Yes. Is this? Yes. And there's always like some that don't, you know, it's like you have
Mhm.
to have 5 out of the 7 or
Right.
6 out of the 9 or whatever. And they're like, yeah, that's a panic attack. And they're like, oh, I thought I was crazy, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah,
absolutely.
good point. Yeah.
I think again, I'm coming at this as a layman, but it does help it helps to understand. Again, it's not to put people in a box, and it's not
Yeah.
to make excuses for why they can't do life.
Right.
Neither of those is the point. There was a there was a video I took issue with a little bit because it was someone who said, I keep seeing these memes about if you care then you'll reach out, and it's like, okay, but like I have such and such, which means I don't reach out because I have such and such, and so you just have to deal with that. And it's like, okay, yes, but no.
Mm-hmm.
You do have such and such, and that makes it very difficult for you to be the one reaching out. I understand. That's absolutely a thing. That doesn't take away your responsibility in the relationship to make sure you're putting something out there for your friends, your family, whoever
Yeah.
to work with.
And there are a lot of ways to do that. And if it doesn't
Yeah.
fit your personality, do it a different way. And it kind of goes back to that Mr. Rogers quote.
Yes.
You're putting me outside my comfort zone by you being in crisis.
Yes.
Eh,
That's
no.
not quite it.
Yeah. And again, there are definitely reasons why people have a difficult time reaching out.
Oh
There's
yeah.
usually a way to reach out. There's usually a way to do everything you know, in honoring your own abilities and comfort levels. And
I definitely this video stuck out to me because it is an area where I struggle is being the one to initiate contact. Um, because most of mine is I don't want to be a bother,
mm-hmm.
or I think, oh hey, I should talk to that person, and then 3 weeks go by and it just
Mm-hmm.
didn't happen. And then you have the guilt of it not happening, so then you don't reach out because you're like, no, I have to reach out in a really important way now, and then that
Right.
just adds problems.
Or
And
yeah.
yeah,
I
and
was just going to say it's like forgetting someone's name.
yeah,
At some point, it's too embarrassing to ask. So after
exactly,
a certain amount of time, you're there like, if I reach out now, I'll just sound like a jerk.
right.
Yeah.
And so that's why that video stuck out for me a lot. Is because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wait, no, I'm one of those people, but I also know it's my responsibility to find a way to reach out and make sure
When
that people feel
people,
loved.
yeah. And again, just that connection is huge. That may be the biggest chunk. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the whole chunk. About things where people say that's half the battle. They're like, you never talk about the second half.
Yes. Oh
But
my
yeah,
gosh.
reaching
Yeah.
out is half the battle. There's still other things that are part of that battle.
My
But I
hus-
do, go ahead.
my husband and I are well balanced because I'm the one of, oh, I don't want to ask that question because what if they don't want to talk about it? And he's the one of, well, what if we don't ask that question and they need to talk about it? So he always asks the question. And so
Mm-hmm.
we cover both sides of the spectrum here.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. One of the things I suggest to people when they're kind of not sure about that thing, am I going to cause more problems by
Yeah.
reaching out? Am I going to cause more problems by not saying anything? Is I say to come up with 3 things that you're comfortable with. So like if something happened to you, Anna, and I said, hey, Anna, I'm here if you want to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I remember someone had a loss in their family, and I think I said, um, I can take you out to lunch if you want to talk about it. I can take you out to lunch to absolutely not talk about it,
Yeah.
or I can bake you brownies, so to kind of give them a couple of options to at least help point them not only in what you're willing to do, but also to help them think, you know what, I really do need a time where I'm not talking about this,
Yeah.
where I just focus on a good dinner,
Mm-hmm.
or I really do need my bathrooms cleaned. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need a hug, or I really need a hug.
Yeah.
I don't want, a donation or whatever. And sometimes I kind of need a donation.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, but
I like that.
it's hard. I kind of think of what's the worst that could happen either way. If you do reach out and the other person is annoyed, I, people have been annoyed at you before, been annoyed at
Yeah.
me.
Well,
Um,
and at least I'm getting to the point where at least if I reach out and they don't want to talk about it, they have the opportunity to say so.
it puts the control with them rather than with you.
Yeah.
And I would say, hey, I'm here if you need to talk, or if you don't need to talk, you don't have to. I actually do that when people are going through tough times, and like it's one of those things where like 12 people ask,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with blank blank blank, and I want to say I'm interested, reach out to me,
Mm-hmm.
let me know how that doctor's appointment went, but
Yeah.
I always say, if it's helpful to you, you know, let me know how that doctor's appointment went, but don't add it as an obligation that now
Hmm.
that I asked, you have to let me know how that doctor's appointment went. I can sit with my own curiosity about how that doctor's
Yeah.
appointment went. Yeah.
That's kind of up there with I saw a few posts about this online recently about when you're trying to invite someone over to your house, instead of saying, "Hey, if you want to come, you should come over," or instead framing it as, "I would love for you to come over if you're available. If not, that's okay too."
Yeah.
And it's taking the guilt out of it, or
Yeah.
taking the push out of it, and also making it not sound like, well, I guess you could come if you really wanna.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if I want you to, but if you want to.
Yeah.
I did that recently this afternoon. Oh, don't know where that came. This Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
where I didn't want to pressure anybody, but I did want to welcome them. And I said, I'd love to have you for dinner. If it's just, the two of us, we're happy with that.
Yeah.
We'd be also happy. We'd be delighted if you came, but
Yeah.
we'd also be we'll still be happy if you don't. You're not going to
Right.
ruin anything. Yeah.
Very nice.
One thing keeps coming to my mind, again, and when something comes to my mind, I think, well, share it. Kind
Sure,
of like
do
what we
it.
were talking about. And I don't know where this fits in, so I don't care where it fits in. But um, they compared this to offering someone a piece of pie, like to kind of reach out 3 times. So if
Mm-hmm.
you come over to my house and I say, "Oh, hey, Anna, would you like a piece of pie?" And
Mm-hmm.
you say, "Oh, no," maybe ask again, because that might be a polite "oh no."
Mm-hmm.
So I say, "It's really no problem, have a piece of pie, I'd love to give you a piece of pie." And you might say, no." And then I say, "Okay, I'm going to eat one, do you want one?" And if you say no the third time, no more pushing.
Right.
But saying the second time, I think, is sometimes helpful in case there's something else getting in the way, like, "Oh, Anna, if you need to talk about that, I'm happy to talk." And they're like, "No." And they're like, maybe you're saying that out of politeness, or that you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to put me out. So I'll say, I'm here if you need me.
Yeah.
Um, but there is kind of definitely a point where it's like, stop asking, you know?
That's a funny concept because within certain cultures, there's actually an etiquette precept for that. I don't remember which one it is. It's one of the cultures in Asia
Mm-hmm.
where you're, as the guest, you're not supposed to accept it till the third time they offer. And
Yes.
the reasoning is because if they offer you the third time, then that means you really are not putting them out by eating their food.
That's a good point.
And
Yeah.
so it's that same point of care from the other side.
Uh-huh.
Because the first time you don't want to take their food because you don't want them to be going without because they made you food, and the second
Right.
time you're really making sure that they didn't want. But if they offer it the third time, they have plenty to spare, and it was one of those kind
That's,
of
yeah,
things.
something to keep in mind, not just with cultural, but with individual people. Like, I
Yeah,
do know people who would offer something even though they kind of needed it themselves. And I
yeah,
also know people who are there like, "You want a piece of pie?" And the other person says, no. And they're like, "All right."
yeah.
I have to tell you, this story, again, has nothing to do with anything except that I think it's funny. um, Someone was over at my house and had made uh, microwave popcorn in the bag.
Okay.
And I hate sticking my hands in that bag because it's all greasy. So I handed her a bowl and I said, "This is for you."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Oh, thank you for the gift." And I'm like, so, and in my head, I was there like, okay, what do I do? Like, I don't want to embarrass her. I actually
Mm-hmm.
don't care about the bowl. Should I let her buy, So I put my arm around her and I said, "It's just for your popcorn. If you really want it, you can have it." Just because of our relationship, I mean. But I was there
Right.
like, and then my daughter told me later on, I was sharing this. I share funny things with everybody, and the person I'm sure is okay with it, and nobody knows who she is, even if she isn't okay with it. But my daughter said she lives with boys. boys don't look at her and say, oh, you've got a bag of popcorn, let me reach out and fix your... And again, nothing against boys and girls, but women do tend to kind of go like, okay, who needs something? What's missing? And my daughters are like, her sons and her husband just don't do that. So she wasn't expecting it. She's like, why are you giving me this bowl? Is it a gift? You know, no, it's so your fingers don't get greasy. I anticipated your need.
Right. That's funny.
So I love talking to you. We have such great conversations.
We do.
Do wander. I'm very curious as to whether there's any flow to this that is coherent to other people.
That is a good question. Like, it makes sense to me, but, you know, yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, if they don't like it, they're more than welcome to not listen. And if they love it, you and I can find all sorts of tangents to go off on.
All of them. Every single one. For more resources, shop at www.upandupwellness.com and hit that subscribe button. If you are in crisis and struggling right now, the national hotline is 988, and they can help you any time of the day or night.